Hello everyone. Today we're going to be looking at Linux in disguise. This looks like Windows 10 in a VM, but it is not Windows 10. It is in a VM, but it's not Windows 10. This is LinuxFX, and the creators of it, or the developers behind it, have gone to great lengths to make people feel like it is actually inside Windows 10. And you can see that we've got off the right click menu here some different backgrounds, some of which I have seen in Windows 10 before, like this one, and some of which are edited. Now, I don't know how long this particular distribution of Linux is going to be around. I think that if Microsoft get wind of what the developers have done here, they might get a little bit upset about the blatant, shall we say, copying of assets that they've used. We can see here, for example, the trash bin, the network icon, the home folder, the computer. These are ripped straight from Windows 10. The look and feel, the user experience, the menu bar. If we go in and have a look at the Office Productivity Suite, we can see that it's Office 365 application icons, which they are using. I notice Evolution is actually their mail client, but they've given it the Outlook icon, for example. So I'm not sure how that's going to work. This is an open source product. They're not, as far as I'm aware, generating any profit from it. So I don't know what the legality of it is in terms of whether there's grounds for Microsoft to sue them for copyright violations or anything else. But the bottom line is they have used a lot of assets, or at least it looks like they've used a lot of assets. They might have drawn these up themselves using base assets as a starting point. I don't know. I don't know what they've done there. But this is Linux. Underneath the hood, this is running Ubuntu 20.04, which is a LTS version of Ubuntu. And today I'm just going to go through and show you what's in a default installation. I have added a couple of applications under games. That would be these 3 Patience-like games. Steam does come installed. Everything else that I show you is in the default installation of LinuxFX. So what I would recommend you do if you're a new to Linux user, if you're someone who looks at this and thinks, you know what, I'm ready to try out Linux, but I'm not ready to stop using all of the commands and shortcuts and everything that I've learned in all my time with Windows 10, Windows 8, Windows 7, Windows XP, however far back you go. This, I think, is a good way to go. This is Linux. It's, to me, Linux with training wheels on. So it fully engages a Windows-like experience. It does have Windows updates, or updates. This is actually done through apt-get or apt-update. Unlike updates from Microsoft, they A, work, and B, can run in the background without a reboot unless it upgrades or updates the Linux kernel. Can't see anything obvious here. Place changes, issue. Yes, replace it. Sure. So that's just going to go through and do its thing. So we'll just have a look at what comes installed out of the box. So under accessories, you've got Anti-Micro, which looks like some sort of gamepad software or joystick software. We've got Archive Manager, which is essentially a WinZip-like. It's basically an application used for opening different types of archives. Backup, I believe this is going to be Timeshift, but I might be wrong. It looks very time-shifty, but here we go. No, it's Deja Dupe. Etcher, that's a program that you use for creating boot USBs. So if you were to have this as a root operating system and you were wanting to create a boot USB to install another type of Linux down the track, you could use that for that. Calculator, I'm not going to go into that. Clip Manager, which is a clipboard manager. This is a file browser, so very similar to File Explorer. In fact, it's got the File Explorer icon. But I believe it's Nemo. Looks like Nemo to me. Yep, Nemo. Yep, so it's now up to date and we don't have to reboot. Look at that. Fonts, Font Manager, Help. I wonder if this is going to be GNOME Help or if it's going to be a man page-esque. No, Ubuntu. So here's one way that we can confirm that it is actually Ubuntu operating under the hood. We'll keep going. Midnight Commander. Now, Midnight Commander essentially is a text editor. It's very similar to the old WordPerfect, if you've ever used that. Mousepad, which is very much like Notepad, and in fact has got the Notepad icon on it. Screenshot, which is a screenshotting tool. You can use this to take screenshots. Just seeing if it's going to tell me what it's actually called. Screenshot. There you go. Haven't used this one before. I tend to use Flameshot personally. We'll keep going. Viewer for text info, which is a type of text. Another text editor, virtual keyboard, Visual Studio Code. Now what this is for those of you who are interested in doing development work. Now I expect, given that this is more aimed at the beginners Linux, there's not going to be too many of you out there, but if you were wanting to get your eye in or learn about how to code in Python or C++ or Java or anything else, you can actually use this application for that. It's essentially the same as Visual Studio, but it's a light version of it. And Wine Tricks. Now this, you're not going to go into it very often. What this does under the hood and in the background is allows the user to actually download MSI packages from the internet and run them, or at least try to run them. It will install the application thinking it's a Windows environment and then try and run them, which is another reason why I say this is a very good distribution for a brand new to Linux user, because the training wheels are very much on here. Education, you've got LibreOffice Math, which is essentially a calculator or a formula editor. Games, there's Steam installed. I haven't configured it or anything, so I'm not going to go into that too much. Different graphics type stuff, so you've got what looks like a flowchart creator, some Inkscape, you've got GIMP, which is essentially the open source answer to Photoshop. Various things in there. Internet, looks like you've got two web browsers out of the box. You've got Firefox web browser and Google Chrome straight out of the box. Also has Zoom installed, Teamviewer, also AnyDesk. So Teamviewer and AnyDesk operate in much the same manner, and in fact it actually has AnyDesk open at the moment and sitting in the background. Also a remote desktop client, so that if you wanted to have it as a virtual machine that was always running, you can jump into the remote desktop client and have a look at it. And also Microsoft Teams for those of you who use Teams in your day-to-day jobs. Office we've already had a quick look at, so I'm not going to go too deep in that. Programming, there was also a link to it under, was it accessories? Where is it? I'm sure I saw it under accessories. Yeah, here it is, Visual Studio Code. Sound and video, media player. If you've been on Windows for a long time, you will probably already know about VLC. There's also a simple screen recorder, which I believe may be... No, it's not. It's not OBS. I would actually probably install OBS personally, but that's just because I'm comfortable with it. Another media player, it's actually for music, so your MP3s and the like. and a manager for it. Universal, I don't know what Magnus is, I've never used it, so I'm just going to skip over it. CID. Okay, so we've got tools here. This is interesting. There's tools here for adding the underlying system to a Active Directory domain. Now, Active Directory is, of course, Microsoft's implementation of the old Novell Active Directory, and basically it's a mechanism for keeping computers in large enterprises and small enterprises and pretty much any business into some sort of order, allowing group policies to be applied to them, and essentially having the computer report into the domain to say that it is active and alive. Interesting that they've put this on here. I don't know how popular it's going to be or how often you would need to use it, but it is good that it's there. File manager actions. There's not really a lot here that we're going to need to worry about. Gparted would be interesting for the basic user. What it does is it enables you, after entering your password, to see what the layout of your hard drive is. Now, obviously, this is a virtual drive that's only 20 gigs, so it's just basically telling me it's all in one partition, and it's about 50%, a little bit over 50% full at the moment. But if you had another drive, that would show up in here. If you wanted to add partitions, you can do that through the Gparted menu. Now, I don't use Gparted for this myself, but it's there, it's an option. And if you're wanting to get a tutorial on exactly how it works, there's plenty of tutorials out there, and I might even run one myself. Htop is essentially a terminal version of Task Manager. So you can see that it's got 4 gigs of memory assigned, 1 gig in use, and you can see what the CPU cores are currently doing, and I've assigned 4 to this particular virtual machine. You can also see the processes that are running. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. This is administration Midnight Commander again, which we've already gone over. Power statistics, if you were running on a laptop, this would be really interesting. It would also provide your battery life indication. Adding and removing printers. Now, this is an interesting one. It's got the icon from the Microsoft Store on it, saying software. It's not the Microsoft Store, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. It's actually a, I believe it's a Synaptic, but it's some sort of package management software, which connects into the package management software of the Ubuntu that's under the hood. Software Updater we've already had a look at. Another way of creating a startup disk if you wanted to create one. So you don't just have Etcher, you've also got this. Yep, Synaptic Package Manager, so that confirms my thought as to what it was underneath. System Monitor. Now this has been skinned. This is very much like if you've ever used Task Manager in Windows, this will be familiar to you. You can see all the processes, all the things that are running. You can see how much CPU and memory it's utilizing and what the network activity is. And you can see the underlying file systems, which is not what you normally see in Task Manager, but it's an added little bonus which they've thrown in, which is nice. We'll come back to administration. System properties, this would be all the system equivalent. So you've got advanced system settings where you can set the computer name. I've given it the very unoriginal name of LinuxFX. And I've just left it in a work group because I'm on a VM. I'm not joining it to a domain or anything else. You can see your hardware through Device Manager. As you saw me, just click on there. And I should be able to go back, I believe. No. Okay, so it's just running in the background. That's fine. And you can also see... Okay, so they're keeping this temporarily disabled. I believe that's because I haven't run this as administrator, and interesting, it's got Panel de Controle as the title. Now, I'm not sure if that's Portuguese or some other language. I know that this comes out of Brazil, so I would expect it's probably Portuguese. or it could be a specific dialect used within Brazil. I'm not too sure about that. And I'm sorry if I butchered the pronunciation of that. I'm really not sure. And then you've got all your advanced stuff. So you can see that if you're a Windows user, you are going to be very, very familiar with how this all works. You can see your users, you can see your accounts, you can just go back and forth and browse through it as you normally would. So I think that there's a lot of benefit here for a Windows user who is looking to get into Linux but doesn't want to change their knowledge base and doesn't want to change what they have historically gotten used to. Now, having said that, as with all Linux systems, there are certain applications which just don't work with it. So this is where we talk about things like your bleeding edge games that have just been released. Your Office 365 can work. You can use it through the web browser, but if you don't like that experience, then you're really tied back to either using your LibreOffice, which is what is installed, or alternatively creating a virtual machine using VirtualBox, which you can get. This is Ubuntu. You can get VirtualBox under Ubuntu, no problem at all, and then run up a Windows virtual machine specifically so you can run your Office 365. They are the two ways that I would consider doing it. I would only consider the second if you have pretty decent amount of RAM and pretty decent amount of hard drive space and CPU. So you'd want at least 4 cores, 8 threads, so a hyper-threaded CPU. Or if you can't get hyper-threaded, if you've only got single cores. So I know Intel did this for a while, that they only sent out CPUs with single cores, no hyper-threading. So 1 core, 1 thread per go. But when they did that, they increased the core count. So you can get an 8-core or a 10-core CPU with that many threads. So just depending on what you're using under the hood. If you're using a more or less recent Ryzen CPU, so anything from Ryzen 1, Ryzen 2, right through to current gen, you shouldn't have too many problems. If you're using an older AMD system, I do know that some of the AMD chips didn't work too well with Linux, so I'm not sure how that's going to play with you, if that's your particular use case. Coming back into this, we've got themes, we've got window tiling, so you can actually change the way that the windows display, so snaps and heads up on tile and all sorts of things like that. It really is a very well thought out little system. It's got time shift on here as well. Terminal. These are all your preference settings, so that's where you can change your backgrounds, your display modes and things like that. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on these for security reasons, particularly the firewall, but it's there, and it's there out of the box. I haven't had to install it. It was already there. So just to show you the Windows Store, Hair Package Management, which I'm pretty sure this is Synaptic that's skinned. We've seen an icon in there which sort of suggests that is the case. They've just called it software, so maybe it's not. About software, yeah. Looks like it may not be, but there is Synaptic on here as well if you're more familiar with that. The other thing that's on here is, of course, the terminal. This is the definitive proof that we're not running Windows. It is actually a Linux system, and you can see that it's even detected it as being an Ubuntu system under the hood. Now, the last time I ran this, actually, it showed up with the Windows FX. So this is likely to be a side effect of the system updates that went through. So I can get, I should be able to do, excuse me, sudo apt install pfetch, super secure password. Okay, couldn't locate pfetch, but it is running. So it does prove that it is an APT. So we've got now 3 loads of proof which indicate that this is definitely an Ubuntu system. We can see that it's using a Windows Manager of Mutter or Muffin and a desktop environment running under Cinnamon. So they've obviously spent a little bit of time tweaking the Cinnamon settings so that it feels and looks exactly like Windows 10. So would I recommend this to everybody? Not to everybody, no, I wouldn't. And the reason for that is because not everybody, even brand new people coming out of Windows 10, wants to have a Windows 10 look and feel in their first Linux distribution. I see that there is a lot of benefit here, and I can see that for someone who has been in Windows potentially for a very long time, or someone who is very hesitant or resistant to change, those are the use cases where I can see this being a good alternative. I can also see it being a very good alternative for people who perhaps run their own business and want their staff to start using Linux. They're trying to transition their entire environment from a Windows environment to a Linux environment for whatever reason. I can see that this would be a good way of doing that because it lowers the barrier to entry. Everyone knows how Windows works. Everyone knows, you know, if I want to start something, I need to go to the Start menu or find the icon on my desktop. They know how it all works. So in those circumstances, I can see that being a good thing and being something that you would probably want to use. However, there are some users, particularly the more technical users out there, the people who possibly work in IT and want to try and move away from Windows because they're sick of losing the documents that they've been working on and Windows just decides to do an update, or the people who know how computers work and therefore are a little bit less hesitant or a little less resistant to learning a new operating system. They're happy to go into the terminal and start running commands. They're happy to learn a new operating environment or desktop environment, so they're not tied to the Windows look and feel. For those users, I would say no, this is not the Linux for you. Certainly you can try it, and I would recommend you do so, but be aware that you're probably going to get past this particular look and feel very, very quickly. But as with all Linux distributions, the look and feel is temporary. You can change it out at any time. There's a guide on me doing that, which I've done. I'm not sure if I've released it yet. If not, it's coming very soon, so watch this space. Where basically I take a Debian install, which is running LXQT, and I install LXDE on it, and I switch in between them. So it's not terribly onerous to change your whole environment. You can do that, and this is a good way to start. But again, with the limitations of Wine and the way that things work here, if you are a more technical user, if you're ready to stop using and relying on downloaded applications and MSIs and EXEs, then I would absolutely recommend that you look at another Linux distribution. I would probably recommend either Linux Mint, Manjaro, or Arco Linux. They're probably the 3 that I would recommend for that type of user, because that type of user is going to be less afraid about diving into their system and less afraid of breaking things because they're looking to learn. And I think Arch, Arco Linux, and Manjaro, those 3 will really teach you how Linux works. And Linux Mint is more beginner friendly than those 3. But again, it's a little bit more advanced and a little bit more obvious that you're in a Linux environment than what this one is. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Smash that like button if you like it. Subscribe if you're interested in seeing more beginning Linux videos. I am doing a series slowly, sort of 1 or 2 videos a week. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.